All right, welcome back, everybody. Seems like we just talked. Haha. Mr. Palmer, how are you?
Doing good, John. How are you?
Good, and we have Mr. McCaigue back with us for another appearance. It seems like we just talked to him.
Round two.
Oh, exciting.
Full disclosure, we just perfectly planned this to split this in two, and I looked at Jim's script this morning and said, wow, it's wireless and then wired. So we wanted to sort of have a logical split, although I think we have maybe room for a couple minutes of Wi-Fi before we jump into the wired, because I'm a Wi-Fi guy. I don't like talking wired. I don't like talking switches. It's just the bane of my existence. So there was one item I know that we didn't get to, and we sort of beat up the clients a little bit towards the end. But Jim, do you want to talk about it?
We're talking about wired, right?
Well, I was going to say we could talk about MBR first for just a couple minutes, then we flip completely into wired.
So, all right, we can talk about that. And welcome back, Ryan. Yeah,
thank you.
If you didn't listen to part one with Ryan, go back to that episode. I'll even put a link for you in this show notes to go to that show. Go listen to that one, and you can catch up with Ryan and John and I as we talked about K-12 and education and going back to school. And one of the things that, and it's funny because as we were emailing about this earlier this week, we were talking about different things that you can do to help out your network. And in the last episode, you were referring to band specific SSIDs. And it's really funny because I gave a presentation at a conference this past February. And one of the things I touched on briefly was this idea of band specific SSIDs. I used to be a big proponent of it. And then I went to no, we need to have the same SSID. And then I changed my mind and said I need to split. And it's funny because I keep going back and forth on this. And so that again is a debate all to itself that would take a 30-minute episode.
Sure.
And so, but the other thing that I want to touch on real quick are some basic things that we can do to help, and one of them being the minimum basic rate.
Right.
So we're now going to do a cage match, and Ryan's going to say one thing and I'm going to disagree with him, and then we're going to fight it out, and then we'll talk about John's favorite subject of wired. So
oh man. So why would you set a min rate, right? So one of the challenges is students don't just sit in one classroom, right? They move around, right? I'm going from my English to my math to my history class, or whatever it is, and a lot of times now in these one-to-one environments, everybody's got a portable device or two. You want the devices to roam cleanly. Now, first part of roaming is to make sure that we have APs appropriately spaced, and that in every classroom, I want to have a clear winner. I want a device that I can see that's above and beyond the other access points, that has the power that the device is going to say, hey, I'm attracted to this because look, it's got this great, signal to noise ratio, and I can see the device cleanly and connect to it, and all of that. So we try to make the decision, as we talked about in the last episode, for the device easy. Pick the clear winner in the space. When we've got a high density of APs and all the APs are just a few dB apart, it makes it a little bit harder to figure out, hey, who do I want to connect to? And then when roaming happens, the roaming is about the device needing to leave one place, and we've talked about the fact that it's sticky. It's going to stick to an AP that it was associated to. So we want to see that device roam from one to the other cleanly. Well, one way that we can do that is we set the minimum connection rate, the BSS min rate. So now the question is, what are our options? Do we do 12, 24, 11? What is it that you want to do? So I have always been pretty conservative around this area, and I'll say, we're going to set a min rate, but we're going to start at the low end and say, let's just get you connected here, and see how the devices roam. If you're getting good roaming activity and devices that are moving around are able to snap to the next AP along the way, then we've probably got this setting right. However, we find that devices are sticky and bandwidth is dropping off and they're still not moving the way we want, we can crank that up. And we can say, look, if a device can't associate at a minimum, in your case, 24 megabits per second, drop it. The AP is going to force the device to go essentially to another. So I'm a fan of using the min rate and making sure that, and that, in my opinion, helps with the roaming activities, gets the devices moving where they need to go.
All right. So we're going to go back to an episode we had a few episodes ago. I'm going to hold your feet to the fire. You don't get to say it depends. John's laughing because John knows where. Yeah, I'm going, because it's funny. Total sidebar here. I was working with somebody that we all know. She was in an event last week. Yeah, last week. And this topic came up. And I am a huge fan of higher. Basically, I say go as high as you can, because there's an issue when you have really low minimum rates. So for me, I always tell people start high and only go low if you have to. So I say 24 megabits per second. What say you, Mr. McCaigue? What is your number?
I start at half that and move up.
That's fine.
And I'm finding success with that. So that's my judge, right? So, but there's always a middle ground. And so some of my admins at some of the schools are moving it up. But I'm pretty conservative in my design and my power settings and other things like that. And that's assuming I've designed the network too, right? And they've put the APs where I asked them to put them. And it's, there's a lot of caveats I could throw at that. So I'm not going to throw out the depends, but it kind of depends.
No, it 100% depends. So that's fine.
Yeah.
So, John, what say
I was
ye?
going to say I'm in the same boat. I usually, whenever I was tinkering with it, we used to start with the 24. We got really aggressive, and I remember our SME at the time going, "Wow, you guys are going crazy aggressive." But we knew our design. We put the APs where they needed to be, and we knew we could probably pull it off. And we never looked back. And it depends on, again, your design. If you're building a greenfield design, you can design for that. If you're not, and you're kind of inheriting one, and it's a brownfield kind of thing, it does depend. You're going to have to tweak it. You're going to have to tune it. You're going to have to watch what your clients are telling you in your metrics, whatever you've got. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But it depends. But I would definitely say, if you're trying to give the best client experience, that 24 meg min rate is, you're basically ensuring that the people that are connecting to your devices, to your APs, are going to be getting a really good experience.
Good throughput. It's all or nothing, get on or not.
The advice. So here's the advice I'd give to people, because I worked on networks where I didn't have a choice of where I put the APs. I didn't have a choice. I didn't get to do the design. I didn't get to do any of that stuff. It was like, we're putting the AP in this one location because that's where we have the drop and you can't move it. And so here's the advice I would give to people. If you're unsure, if you don't know, if you don't even know what a min rate is, you can see it in your controller, start at 12. And if nobody complains, bump it to 24, because there's a whole bunch of other stuff that happens with this minimum rate. And I have my reasons that we won't get into, because this gets into that next level discussion. And if they complain, then you bump it back down to 12. But you want to you want to keep that thing, because my feel is, if you have a minimum rate of 6 megabits per second, and we won't talk about 1, 2.2, 5, or 11, because those are B rates. You don't want to use those, but you want your choices to either be 6, 12, or 24. And 6, if you're sitting here going, I need to have a minimum rate of 6 megabits per second, or else my clients won't connect and they won't stay connected, then that is an indication to you and your administration and to your bosses that, hey, we need to do a new design. Because if 6 is your only choice to keep clients connected, then you need to do a new design. So there you go. Of the 3 that you should be picking, start with 12, try to go up. And if you have to go to 6, that's indicative of a bigger problem. And you need to call somebody like Ryan. Don't call me or John. Call Ryan.
Yeah. If you're in one of my 3 states.
Oh, no. I don't care.
I'll put
Anywhere in the
Ryan-
world.
Nation,
Call Ryan.
worldwide. Yeah, sure. Yeah,
I'll
call
put
me.
Ryan's
Look in the
number at
show
bottom
notes.
of the video. It's flashing on the screen right now. They can see it, right, Jim?
Bing, bing, bing,
Oh,
bing.
yeah.
Post my cell phone too, would you?
Here, call
you
the
go.
number on the bottom of the screen. And
That'll mess with
lovely.
people.
Lovely.
But so pivoting from that, because it is, and ultimately the reality is everybody that knows Wi-Fi, even a little bit knows, any one of these conversations could go down a rabbit hole that could talk. We could talk about it for hours. But wireless is so easy, right? It doesn't need any wires, right?
Yeah, right.
oh,
Yeah.
It does actually. That's
John,
one of those. I
John,
said it's the
John.
bane of my existence.
John.
As much as I sit there and just say like it's a wire, it's a power adapter for me, and Jim and I have had this conversation many times. It's not, right? And so you've got things like, obviously you've got to take into account the switch infrastructure, but DNS, DHCP, everything comes into play.
PoE, VLANs.
Well, and this is something
Oh,
near and
boy.
dear to your heart, I think. So I'll let you kind of take the thunder, Mr. Palmer.
So, full disclosure, we've been emailing all week before we recorded this. And Ryan touched on some things that, again, I think is very near and dear to my heart. And so I want Ryan to kind of take the lead on this and sort of walk us through around the ideas of, the networking service, the wired networking services that we rely on, that John relies on as a Wi-Fi person. Things like DNS, DHCP, VLAN. We'll throw some VLANs in there. We'll even talk about some PoE stuff. We alluded to it earlier about PoE. So Ryan, why don't you kind of walk us through things that you're seeing from your perspective in dealing with these, about, sort of these wired issues that John likes to pretend don't exist.
Oh, I'm telling you. So, inevitably somebody's going to call you and say the Wi-Fi is broken, or they'll use a stronger word, right? And unfortunately, what I'm finding a lot of times is it's not the Wi-Fi. The Wi-Fi is just the edge, right? It's the connection point. And the wireless LAN professionals guys have got a great little chart that shows here's the Wi-Fi on the edge, and here's this, all the services at the back end that support it. Yeah, you're holding it up. You got send them a link to that, right? So that chart, shows that all this infrastructure that's behind the AP, the physical cabling makes a difference. Is it Cat 5, Cat 6? Did you run it past a light ballast? Is it over 300 feet? What's your PoE power capabilities? Is it terminated properly? Is the patch cable okay? So layer, the OSI model rules layer 1 first thing. Then we move up to the idea of the switching and the switching capabilities and the AP. Can it do 1 gig? Can you bond, two cables together and do link aggregation? Or is that needed? And so we have a lot of debates around the physical infrastructure supporting the multi-gig communication. These APs are so much faster. I mean, if you would have told me back when I was doing citywide Wi-Fi in 2006 that we would be, and that was ABG, Wi-Fi, that we'd be as fast as we are today, I would have just laughed at you, right? And so it's amazing speeds that we're capable of, but the back-end systems have to support it. And what I've seen in the education space is this lean IT kind of feel where, they don't have a lot of guys to support. They don't have a lot of infrastructure engineers. They don't have RF engineers. And a lot of times, they don't necessarily understand some higher level networking concepts. But as part of that lean IT part, they've consolidated a lot of these services. So there's one firewall for the school district. There's one DNS server for the school district. There's one DHCP server, and sometimes these are one device or multiple devices, and they've centralized it at the district office or at the high school, and then the other schools are connected to it over metro links or things of that nature. And what we're finding is people will call me and they'll say, I'm having high connectivity failures on my client devices. There's something wrong with the Wi-Fi. And it was really tough to go in, and you've got to do packet captures and figure out, what's failing where, why. And over the last year and a half now, 2 years, we've started doing proof of concepts with our Ruckus AI. And wow, just mind-blowingly exciting data that started popping out at us in some of these districts, where they were seeing latency on their DNS and DHCP of 600, 900, 1,000 plus milliseconds for just DHCP. Well, obviously a device is going to time out and do a self-assigned IP address at some point, and it's not going to go anywhere, but it looks like the Wi-Fi is failing. And it's not. It's an essential network service at the back end that's being slammed by, as you talked about in the first episode, a spike of clients showing up at 8 o'clock in the morning, right? And the server's under resourced and it can't provide the connectivity, or the latency across the LAN links is too much for it to respond in a timely way. So we've been able to find some of these connectivity issues across the LAN that are causing some of these issues, and we've had to push for some architectural changes. Put the DHCP on an edge switch in the school or something of that nature. Push it out and federate it so that you don't have it all consolidated into one place. And so there's much more to look at than just the Wi-Fi. The Wi-Fi and the signals and the channels and all that, that's great, but you really have to understand what's behind it.
No, 100%.
Keep up with us, John.
Sorry.
No,
Sorry.
this is absolutely, this is part I can actually, not even playing dumb. I can actually play into it. I mean, I've had, talking DHCP, I've had issues where we had people, it was a temporary space set up and they're joining and they're like, well, we can't join, the Wi-Fi is broken. And then we're like, well, they're not getting a DHCP address. Well, it turns out the leases were set too long and the pools were set too small. And the amount of people in the temporary space was to the point from the prior episode, Ryan, about the testing. Right. Mm-hmm. It was a space designed for like 10 people, and suddenly they crammed 150 people in it. And it was a different 150 people now than it was an hour ago. Well, the 150 leases from an hour ago were still up, and the pool was only 175. Guess what? Your DHCP pool just broke. So without getting into the guts of what's going into a 7150 or an 8200 or anything like that, it's important to know upstream that, like you said, Wi-Fi is a very little part of the equation, but everybody goes and my family hates it when I say, like, the Wi-Fi is not broken. And they're like, I can't get on the internet. I'm like, well, that's different.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, how are you saying the Wi-Fi is not broken? I'm like, well, because I can get to all of my local switches and servers and systems on Wi-Fi. I can't get out of the house because there's something broken with the ISP.
Bingo.
But Wi-Fi is fine. But don't ever get, that's a very bad argument to have with your spouse. Just pro tip, not from experience or anything like that.
I can second that.
Well,
But so you made an interesting point. I'm kind of, we can, I mean, there's other conversations we can have about higher ed and education in general. And I apologize. I just always go to higher ed about network segmentation and things like that. But you made a good point about a couple of things that Ruckus can actually, shameless plug, help with. Because one of the biggest problems, and we touched on it in episode 1, is I have to imagine a lot of with the budgets and things like that, funding is not easy to get, right? And so a lot of times you mention lean staff. And you mentioned Ruckus AI, Ruckus Analytics, Ruckus One. We've got a couple products that are really, I almost want to say they're tailor-made to help these lean staffs do a lot with less. And I'm just kind of curious to see if you've had any traction with that or what your take is on that.
It's true. So I have schools that have like an SNMP management system, right? And it'll tell them, the link capacity and or utilization on a switch port, or it'll tell them if it's up or down, it'll do some pings and things like that. But most of those tools have never provided me the kind of data that I'm getting out of the AI. Especially when it comes to things like connection success and failure rates, latency on DHCP, which I already mentioned, but also latency on authentication servers, so Radius servers that need to provide a lot of authentication and short durations of time. And so being able to see with clear visibility every roaming activity of every client device and how clean it was and what the SNR is of that device as it moves around the network. I mean, it's just an incredible wealth of data, and inevitably nobody calls when they're having a problem. It's yesterday it was broken and I want to know why. Well, yesterday is yesterday, but now that I've got this tool, I can go in and say, let me look at your device, whether I look it up by the MAC address or the IP address or its device name or your authenticated name or whatever it is. I can look it up and I can see, was there a network event or system failure or something else that impacted your device, or was there something about your device? Did you get the PSK wrong when you put it in, or what, any of that? So being able to very quickly drive to a particular root of what the issue was and find out some recommendations for how to fix it is really a powerful tool. Because we don't want to spend all day researching and trying to figure out and variant testing. And so we have tools now that will automatically test in the background and tell us on success or on failure, if you wish, back end metrics or things that are going on. So whether it's a VLAN mismatch or low PoE budget or other things, it's really you don't always see that stuff in standard network management tools.
You bring up something interesting, and I did a presentation it wasn't me, it was somebody else, but we did a presentation at Mobility Field Day 9 where we were talking about, sort of some of the latest stuff that we have. And Ruckus One, really does seem to be, it takes care of a lot of this stuff, because one of the things that came up during that was one of the delegates noticed that in Ruckus One, there's this little thing that pops up on the right-hand side of the screen, and it says, "Did you know?" And it's basically like, it's a way to look at it, and it puts it in plain English of, like, right now I'm looking at mine. It says the average daily airtime utilization last week was, at 53% for 2.4 gigahertz. And so these really are tools, and you're alluding to that, tools that, that can really help school staffs and school administrators, sort of help manage everything, because it's basically the platform, as you log in the morning, you look at it and you go, oh, did you know this is, it's like, hey, what does this mean? And, and if you don't know what it means, or, it might give you maybe it's just a, did you know thing, or it's like, hey, there is this other problem. And so it's really sort of an interesting thing. And the other thing that, we kind of alluded to, and I know I've talked with some other people in the past about this, is in Ruckus AI, which has a feature in there called service validation. And I wrote a guide and I talked about this, and it's like, service validation is such a powerful tool when you really think about what it does. Ryan, have you ever used the service validation?
Yeah. Routinely.
All right. So you've used it more than me. So can you walk us through, what is the service validation piece? What is that part that I feel, from my little bit of use, could be very powerful for some of these organizations?
So if you take an average school district, right? Let's say, assume there's a central point. It's the district office, perhaps, and then a satellite of schools connected together through the network. One of the things that I've used service validation for is to go out to the edges, go to each of the buildings and different AP groups or zones at all the different campuses, and set up some routine tests that go from that edge across the WAN links, across the LANs, across the switch stacks, all the way into the core, and test your DNS, test your DHCP, test your radius server, test the path loss or other things that are going in that space. And so the idea is you can set up a set of routine tests that the AI will run from the edge to the core across your LAN. And if you want, go out and check DNS from Google, if you're using Google DNS or you're using your local ISP's DNS. Run these tests on a routine basis, and they'll run in the background automatically. And then what you want is ultimately tell me if it fails. Raise the alarm if it fails.
Yep.
I don't, if you can run it 10 times a day, I'll be happy. You don't have to tell me when it passes, but if it fails, tell me. Let me know what's going on. And so it keeps an eye on the network for you. It lets you also see the variations, because not every Metro WAN link is made the same, right? And ISPs are, they're doing software-defined networking from one campus to the other across their infrastructure. Well, they've got routers and switches in that mix as well. And so, to be able to watch that link and its throughput and its capabilities, if it wavers, you've got documentation to go to the ISP and say, hey, we're paying for this, but we're getting this, or you've got an SLA and you're not meeting it. And so these routine tests will, basically happen in the background. And by the way, the result of these tests, feeds into, you can provide reports. And there's a whole set of automated reports. So who cares about the reports? Well, the board cares, the school board cares, the principals care, and when you can, kind of do that proactive marketing and give them a weekly summary. Hey, we connected 50,000 students this week, and, their average user experience was this. That helps, get them off your back, so to speak, as an IT guy, because you're able to provide that validation.
I love it. And I love the fact that it's an automated thing and it sends those reports, because if you've been doing Wi-Fi for longer than, a week, that somebody is asking you, well, how many client devices are, and they say people, but it's like, how many client devices, did they work? Was the Wi-Fi good? And it's like, but so having that is really kind of cool. But one of the last things I want to throw in here, and, I think in the last episode, I was teasing it. We teased it with the profiler tool. Is there are other tools if you don't happen to be running, Ruckus One with Ruckus AI. There are other tools that you can use to help with that. And, one of the ones that we like using is the WLAN Pi. And there's some other cool tools and all that. And I'll add that link in. And the WLAN Pi also ties into another tool that helps administrators and everybody, called Wi-Fi Explorer Pro. And so those are a couple of other tools that you can use that, they won't do the in-depth analysis, but it does enough that you can kind of keep up. So we'll throw those links in there to, if you're not lucky enough to be on Ruckus One, but you want to be, call Ryan. Numbers at the bottom of the screen.
Yeah, thanks. Here we go, kid. Well, and I tell people about, there's a lot of tools out there that are coming into the space. And one of the older ones that I always liked was Insider. It's a kind of quasi shareware tool. The idea that I can, see a list of APs, their MAC addresses that they're, BSSI that they're running. I can see the relative signal strength, and I can evaluate. Am I getting neg 65 at this, and then what's the next one down, and how far apart are they separated, and all that. Those are just great tools to just get an understanding what the RF environment kind of looks like. Right.
Yeah, I mean that's the beauty part with, so Jim, you mentioned Wi-Fi Explorer. I mean, Adrian, I'm not getting paid to plug this at all, but he's got a really good suite of tools. I use Signal all the time. He's got some PCAP stuff. He's got a lot. And the beauty part for a budget conscious district, as a Wi-Fi professional, it's something that you don't mind paying for out of pocket. I have paid for out of pocket because it's not the sting of a several $1,000 tool with an annual license. So there are tools out there. There's there are options to fit any budget. And the nice thing is with some of those, it makes you actually learn more about the protocol, which is always invaluable. But so with that said, I think we've kind of hit on all the topics we were looking to hit on, and I don't know that we've got anything else to talk about. I feel like we're getting the hook, and Mr. Palmer's got why does that look like a sheep herding hook there, Jim? I don't know what that with the. Anyways, I think we're at a good point. I wanted to say, I usually ask if there's anything else to talk about, but I think we've hit everything. The only thing I have left to say is thank you, Mr. McCaigue, for spending your time with us. It's 2 great episodes. I think they're great episodes. I'm biased. I don't have any other closing thoughts.
I had a great time. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Hope to come back another time. any topic.
We'll hold you to that. We will definitely do that. Mr. Palmer, any closing thoughts?
No, just good luck to all the K-12 people out there and higher ed people. And yeah, if you need, you need some help, or we're always here. Come find us on social media, or like I said, call the number on the bottom of the screen, and we'll see what we can do to help you guys out and get you going for this school year.
All right. Well, thanks everybody. And to all those going back to school, enjoy, and we'll catch you guys on the next episode.
Thanks, everybody.